Howdy folks, how are we all doing? I want to try something a little bit different. As you can see in the background, I am making Fakemon based off of the Switch 2 Direct, which was released yesterday. If you haven't watched that and you care about this kind of stuff, do. Although there's going to be Fakemon in the background, this isn't going to be the main point of the video. I wanted to talk about the Switch 2 itself, and my thoughts on some of the events what have happened recently. If you've been looking into the Switch 2, you probably already know what I'm going to be talking about. However, it's important to at least bring out the good things, what they announced beforehand, because I've seen a few comments about people upset how it's almost impossible to talk about the good things Nintendo Switch 2 is bringing without it immediately being overshadowed by the bad stuff. And although the bad stuff is really bad, it's absolutely important to at least be aware of the good things they're doing. The new Mario Kart game genuinely looks fantastic. Mario Kart 8 was one of the most purest forms of Mario Kart. It was, out of all the Mario Kart games, it just felt the most best. You know, like everything felt like it worked so well, it almost felt impossible to build off of that. How could you improve on that? And Mario Kart World said, watch and learn. It seems like the Mario Jamboree of Mario Kart, where there's like a bajillion different races, a whole wide open world racing track. It's sick. It's just really cool. Donkey Kong Bonanza. Again, that's the type of game what just wouldn't have existed a few years ago. Like, Nintendo is very open to new ideas with their old IPs, and they're taking risks. They've redesigned Donkey Kong. I think that's pretty important, although a lot of people were on the fence if they liked it or not. The fact that they redesigned such a big, important character is very not like Nintendo, and the fact that they're willing to change around and mess around with their characters a little bit is really good. Game ideas, what seemed impossible a few years ago, are slowly becoming more and more likely, and that's a really fun feeling. The fact that some Switch 1 games are getting like effectively extra DLC bonuses when you transfer and upgrade them to the Switch 2 version is really cool. The Kirby one especially, where it seems like effectively a whole mini sequel campaign. Sadly, I would say Kirby was the best example, and most of the others, at least to me, didn't seem as cool. But you know, they're still pretty good. I like how Pokemon's was just, be happy we're making it in the first place. It was the only one what was just, it runs better when, frankly, it should be running alright on the Switch anyway. But plus, it was just a huge missed opportunity to do, like, you could have done the classic Pokemon version differences with the Switch 1 edition and the Switch 2 edition having different encounters and you being allowed to trade between them. That seems like such an obvious idea. I don't get why they didn't do it, But either way, we'll get the positive stuff out of the way first. A lot of Nintendo IPs were shown off, which is really good. I think being a Nintendo fan is always a little bit hit or miss, because unless you like Mario and Kirby and Pokemon, you're not going to see a whole lot of your characters in a lot of games. All up until, again, fairly recently, when Nintendo has been trying harder than ever to make every one of their IPs as big as, the Marios and Donkey Kongs and whatever. You're getting new Legend of Zeldas every few years now, which is great. Again, Donkey Kong's getting his own new 3D platform, which is great. I say that, there's still no Star Fox F-Zero or Pikmin. Oh, we don't talk about that. It was begging for a Switch 2 edition. I don't get why they didn't. Either way. No, but all in all, it seemed like a really good, strong start to the Switch 2. Until they showed off this cute little demo game. Now, whenever Nintendo releases a new console, typically the console, again, they treat them like toys. They always include little gimmicks what really no other console has. And the way they ease players into knowing what the console is typically releasing a game or two to just show off what their console can do. They had Wii Play for the Wii, Nintendo Land for the Wii U, a bunch of different ones for the Switch, like 1-2 Switch, and that's all I can think of. And for this, well, it seems to be just a fun little tech demo game. Now, this isn't a game. Let's preface that, right? This is a tech demo where it just shows off what the console can do. There's no fun little coat of paint like the other previous games. So watching this, I just thought, I see the caveat. It's not going to be so much a game, but it's just going to come pre-installed on the Switch. You have to pay for it? Why? Why do you want to find out how our console works? Well, you have to spend a couple $100 to get it in the first place. Chuck us a few more, and we'll tell you how it works. I don't know. It's just, why? You could have made it for free and you would have lost nothing. You wouldn't have noticed. And now we're already getting to the meat of it, because the big problem with the Switch 2 is what they specifically didn't show in the Direct. Now, I thought it was going to be a pretty big problem when they even specified the bundles you could buy the Switch 2 in with the Mario Kart downloaded, yet they didn't show off the price. And I remember watching this and I thought, uh-oh, that's never a good sign. If a company is selling you a product in a presentation meant to get people to buy the product and they're not explaining the price, uh-oh. Again, if you're watching this, you probably know, but the Switch 2 itself is going to be, at least in dollar-wise, about $450 or $500. Which is a fair amount more than the Switch 1, but that's not really the problem. Now, I'm just going to be saying I live in the UK, so I use pounds. I'm going to be flip-flopping between pounds and dollars. I know they're not the exact same or even really close, but I'm still going to be talking about large amounts of money regardless. But, you know, buying a new PC, it's, you know, it's like, you could go easily over £1,000 or £2,000. So buying a Switch 2 doesn't seem that bad. And, you know, in the grand scheme of things, it really isn't. As far as I'm concerned, I think it's still cheaper than, you know, PlayStation and things like that. But the problem here, the big whammy, is the games themselves. Mario Kart World is looking to be about $80 to $90. Again, I've not been to America, so I don't know, but spending $90 on a game, you could go out to a game shop and buy that game and get a Big Mac meal on the way home, and as you sat down, you would have spent $100 just going out for like 20 minutes. That's insane! And I think this has a lot of implications as well, what I've not really seen too many people bring up, but it's pretty scary. Now, again, in the UK, buying Mario Kart World physically is £75. And again, a regular new Switch 1 game could be about 50 to 60. So a £15 increase isn't an incredible amount. I say that, it's not a small amount either though, you know? It's a pretty big increase, especially when we was only expecting at maximum a £10 increase. And already we've gone way over that. Now, I'm sure if you're living on Earth, I'm sure you've noticed, but it's increasingly getting harder to live on Earth. And I think it's one of those things where it's not entirely fair to pin this on Nintendo. It's not Nintendo's fault that the government isn't, you know, helping people afford housing and things like that. But at the same time, Nintendo is in itself causing a problem by releasing a game openly saying it's $90. You know what I mean? They have risen the price to an extortionate amount. That is definitely part of the problem. The next thing I'm going to say isn't 100%, so take it with a grain of salt, but run with me on this idea here. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, according to Google, sold 67.35 million copies. That is a lot of copies. Hypothetically speaking, if they released Mario Kart 8 Deluxe for $1, just $1, they would have still made, again, take it with a grain of salt here, I know it's not exactly because people have to be paid wages and there's other people other than just Nintendo, but just for the sake of this, they would have made $67 million just by selling the game for $1. And heck, realistically, they probably would have made even more because more people would have bought it if more people can afford it. But either way, that's not the point I'm making here. So the fact that they could have, you know, I'm not saying they should have done, but they could have released it for $1 and made 67 million. So the fact that they even released it for literally like 50 to 60 times that amount, they made a lot of money. They have no reason, surely, right? No reason to almost double that and sell this game for $90. There's no reason why. They could, I think the important thing is they could have released it at 50. Easily released it at 50. The only difference is the very, very higher up people at Nintendo or the shareholders or anybody, they only get to afford 72 private jets instead of 80. That's like the only difference, you know what I mean? They didn't need to release it stupidly expensive. They didn't need to. They chose to do that. And I think they almost knew what they were doing was wrong because they didn't show it in the direct. That's a huge sign that they weren't proud of the pricing either. Which makes me wonder again, was this a higher up decision or, you know, it's sad. It's very, very sad to see a company, especially Nintendo, of all companies. If you saw literally anybody else do this, people are saying that GTA 6 is going to be £100/dollars or whatever, and like, you won't get an argument if people say that. It's just, oh yeah, I believe that. And it's like, £100? £100 for a game? That's an incredible amount. You know, it's just, you would expect that from like a company like, I believe it's Rockstar Games though, right? You know, you would believe any company. You would believe Warner Brothers turned what could have been a really fun fighting game in multiverses and turned it into just a microtransaction fest. You would believe Warner Brothers would do that. You would believe EA would do something awful behind the scenes just to make that extra little bit extra money because it's EA. You wouldn't expect that from Nintendo. Nintendo was meant to be the good ones, you know? In a world where every company slowly but surely is just turning more and more evil and greedy, Nintendo was meant to be that one safe company what was just always there. And now they're not. And I think the sad thing is, we've seen them turn over the Switch's life, the Switch's one life. We've slowly seen them turn more and more greedy. There's no other word to say but greedy. Again, they started by making us pay for online, which, again, other companies did, but this is Nintendo. They've never had to make us do that before. Again, it's fine. I don't have a problem with it, but it was definitely the start of something, especially the premium membership, where you have to pay near enough double for, you know, hit or miss, let's say, features. Look at all of the Mario Sports titles released for the Switch. Think of how many of them just weren't great compared to like older titles or even just games in general. The stories, the story modes and single player stuff was so vapid and bare bones, and all they really had was multiplayer where you had to pay to use anyway. Mario Tennis Aces is a £50 game with like £10 worth of content, and it's sad how many Switch games you could really say that about. Sword and Shield could have easily been tweaked to fit on a 3DS, and I paid a full console price for it. And again, it's sad how many games were like that, and it's one of those things where the Switch really just felt like Nintendo realizing we can sell anything and it will sell like mad cakes. It doesn't matter the price, it doesn't matter the quality per se, people will buy it. Donkey Kong Country Returns HD might be the saddest Nintendo port I have ever seen, and I've not even played it. I played the original, and I can sincerely say that bringing that bad boy to the Switch should have been the easiest slam dunk at all. So the fact that it wasn't, and the fact that there was awful load times and unbearable multiplayer, just the bare bones, what you just wouldn't have had to sort out surely, that's a bad remake. And again, they're charging full price for it. I feel like I've gone on a bit of a tangent here, but over the Switch's life, we've seen Nintendo get more and more asking for our money, you know, and we've been giving them more money. And I wonder if we're the reason why they're so comfortable charging the Switch 2 games such a high price. Because all of the Switch 1's life, we've been telling Nintendo, it's okay to do this. Keep making them more expensive because we're still going to buy them. You know, it's not fair to say it's our fault, it's just an interesting thought, perhaps. But no, it's definitely not our fault Nintendo has gone greedy. It's their fault. They don't want to make money, they don't want to make lots of money, they want to make an incredible amount of money. And sadly, we are the ones who literally have to pay for it. And it's sad because I was thinking about this. I'm a huge Pikmin fan. I literally, ever since Pikmin 3 came out, I've effectively been watching every single direct hoping for Pikmin 4 news. And that's like 40 directs it took for them to finally show me it. I was thinking after watching this and learning about the prices and everything, how genuinely excited I would be if they announced Pikmin 5 knowing that I would be paying effectively $90 for it. How excited am I going to be for the next Smash trailer, knowing I'm not only going to be paying, again, not literally $100, it'd be like 75 quid, but you know, it's conversion rates or whatever. I'm still going to be paying a lot more. I'm probably going to be paying for DLC. And I guess you could say this is an adult problem, just being able to not enjoy stuff because you have to worry about money and things, but at the same time, it's a little bit on the company charging me for these things. Now, Diamond and Pearl are games I've never played, and although I was excited to play the remakes, they were the first really Pokemon games ever I decided not to buy for no other reason than they seemed way more expensive than what I deemed them worthy. For me, Pokemon crossed a line. They tried to sell me a literal DS game with 3D graphics for near enough full game price. And for me, that was a line I didn't want to cross. So I didn't buy that game. And now I feel like I'm at that point with Nintendo as a whole. They are charging me what I would say is a lot more money than what I should have to pay for this. They have crossed that line for me. In my mind, I wonder if me buying this Switch 2, buying the new Pikmin game or whatever at full price, is that me rewarding Nintendo for being greedy? Is this me being a bad parent to Nintendo? Am I telling Nintendo, keep the prices high, I'm going to be giving you my money no matter what anyway? Because that's not a message I want to give to Nintendo. I want them to know that they've crossed my line. And I think it's important that I keep bringing this up because there's so many, I'm a Nintendo fan, obviously. I watch other Nintendo YouTubers and I'm not calling anybody out. But there's so many times, especially during the Switch era, where again, Nintendo were trying out more greedy tactics, and I'd be watching so many YouTubers being like, Nintendo have crossed this line. They've made Nintendo Online Plus way too expensive. They have crossed that line. I am still going to buy it though. And I remember watching them and it's just like, well, by your own definition, they've not crossed that line because you've given them money. You have rewarded them for crossing your line. What message is that going to give to them? That message is just, keep doing it because I'm going to keep giving money. I know that even if that's not what you intend, your money is doing the talking for you, And for the record, I don't want anybody to feel bad because I understand the way I'm talking about this. I understand if you want to buy Mario Kart World or the new Donkey Kong game or any Switch 2 game, do it. If you genuinely want to, that's fine. I have no problem with that. You are more than free to do what you want. I'm not going to say you're wrong. I'm just saying, for me personally, Nintendo have crossed my line. They have made a product what I have deemed too expensive for a reason what I think is greedy. I would say, realistically, it's pretty objective that they're being greedy here. They have crossed my line, and my response to that is, I'm not following them past that line. If your line is a little bit further, or if you don't have a line, that's fine. You're allowed to do that. You can have fun playing your games you want to play. I'm just not going to be able to do that because I'm not following them past that line. But do you want to know what really hurts? Hurts the most about this Nintendo being greedy thing? At least to me. A few years ago, a fair while ago, I believe I watched it in a Did You Know Gaming video, but it was an interview with some of the people who were working on Super Mario 3D Land. At the time during development, I believe earthquakes were ravaging Japan and, a lot of people were being injured, families torn apart. It was a really sad time. And during that time, the people making 3D Land had this epiphany of just, let's make this game to make people happy. And after watching that and reading the articles and things, to this day, that inspires me so much. Imagine doing something would make people happy. There's that genuine bit of joy where you can only get from Nintendo games because you feel like they just want to make you happy. Now, I've been talking about Nintendo being all greedy, and I'm sure there's a few of you what think Nintendo's a company, it's their job to make money. And it is. It literally is. As somebody who develops his own characters, it's weird because I made my characters because I like to draw. Shigeru Miyamoto made Super Mario because he wanted a mascot to make money with. You know what I mean? It's not the exact same. But I think what made Nintendo so special is that they were really good at not making you think about the money you spent, simply the smiles you had playing their product. Yes, they were a company what only wants to make money. They were really good at least making sure you didn't think that playing their games. They wanted to make you happy. Another heartwarming story I remember reading is when the Wii U flopped so hard, instead of doing what other companies would do and, fire other people whose fault it just wasn't, no, the higher-ups took the brunt of the pay cuts because, well, it was the higher-ups' decision to make the Wii U. They should take that. That's genuinely admirable. That, to me, says we're not a company what only cares about money. We care about people, each other, making people happy. That's what, at least to me, that's what Nintendo represented. Making people happy. This isn't making people happy. This is quite the opposite, and frankly, more than ever, does the opposite seem true. That they don't mind if people are upset now because, well, they're getting money now. That's not a great motto to live by, at least compared to what Nintendo used to represent to me. As a kid who kind of grew up hearing we can't afford it a lot, my heart kind of aches for those kids who won't be able to experience Nintendo the same way I did as a child, simply because of these prices, they simply won't be able to afford them the same way my family could barely do. You know, imagine not having a Switch 2 on Christmas Day just because, frankly, the price was too high. That's not creating smiles. That's not helping people or making them feel happy, you know? And again, you could argue they never did, they just wanted money. I don't think that's exactly true. But even if it was, they were really good at making sure you didn't know that. Here, it's impossible to ignore that. In a world where it's seemingly getting harder and harder for normal people to just live, for a company as big and as moneyed up as Nintendo to say, chuck us $100 for a game we could be selling you for 50? Scary. Especially considering the Wii U did so bad. Yes, the Switch did very good and it had very good marketing, but think of how many people took that chance with Nintendo thinking, you screwed me over with the Wii U, you take my money once again for the Switch. For all intents and purposes, Nintendo owe every single one of their patrons their entire life. You know, obviously, a company is nothing without people buying their products. But just think about that in a literal sense, where, you know, Nintendo's like, oh, thanks for saving us, fellas, from literal bankruptcy because the Wii U sucked. Your reward? Paying $100 for the next games. Come on, pony up. It's like, yikes. It really is. Yikes. And it's scary to think if this is what Nintendo's doing, what are the other companies gonna be doing? Jeez. But yeah, I think I've rambled on long enough. I just wanted to get my thoughts out there because, I thought I got a YouTube channel. I'm working on a new series currently, what's going to be still taking a while. I thought, let's upload a video to bridge the gap. Plus, I wanted to try something new. With my channel name being Lewis Seidel, I always wanted to do a split channel thing. Half of this channel being, well, Seidel and his weirdos, and the other half, Louis, which is just, well, you've just watched a whole episode of it. One where it's all cartoony and goofy, one where it's just a real guy talking, you know, so let me know if you liked that. Let me know if you like these drawings in the background as well. Or don't, because the real discussion should just be about the Switch 2. Again, I know I got a bit heated about saying how I'm not going to be crossing that line or anything. By all means, don't feel bad if you are. I understand it's a, you know, I feel like, there's an argument to be saying that if you are going to be buying a Switch, your money is telling Nintendo, do this again. But I don't think that necessarily makes you a bad person. You have the money to buy a product. You are allowed and entitled to buy that product. I literally can't tell you that's wrong. I just wanted to at least explain my opinions. And, you know, I am going to be buying a Switch 2. Not now, obviously, because again, they've crossed that line. It's just sad how excited I was to buy this on launch, and now it's I'm going to wait a few years, wait for a price drop, you know, because, you know, it's one of those things where I know there's, you know, a fan doesn't have to be somebody who gives them money. A patron would be a better word for that. I think I'm saying that right. But, like, for all intents and purposes, you know what I mean when I say this, I literally cannot afford to be a Nintendo fan. In every sense of the word, you know? It's so hard being a Nintendo fan on a good day, let alone when they're charging this much. So, yikes. Either way, I started rambling even though I said I'm going to stop rambling, so yeah, welcome to the channel. Yeah, let me know what you think, if you like the sprites, if you like the talks, what are your thoughts on the Switch? Did I miss anything? I probably did. I should have written a script, damn it. Oh well, either way folks, enjoy the rest of your day, or if you're off to bed, have the sweetest of dreams, and I will see you all in a bit. Toodaloo, and if you like video games, good luck.